If someone had looked at my house that Sunday morning with a drone, from a height where neither breath nor steps could be heard, they would have said the picture was perfectly static. The lavender at the entrance alley is neatly trimmed, the mats on the porch are lined up, and the turquoise mailbox glistens in the first sun, as if specially for a suburban Denver advertising booklet. From the outside, it seems that an invisible hand maintains order here. I am 56 years old, and for many years I have been that hand, but today everything inside me trembles like a string that has been plucked and left to sound. David, my David, waves from the driver's seat of the pickup, already started, with a boat attached and a stack of fishing rods securely fastened with an elastic strap. His face, tanned from years of expeditions, is cut by sunbeams, as if by a mask. "Will you definitely take care of the seedlings?" he shouts, drowning out the engine, but not turning it off. "First thing," I answer, trying to sound cheerful. He believes. He always believes my everything is under control, as if these words are a shield reflecting any doubts. The engine roars louder, and the pickup, responding to something in the suspension, crawls down the street until the boat flags turn into a dot. With this dot, the sound fades, and only an echo remains in my chest. I slam the front door, carefully, almost apologizing for the noise, and immediately feel the house expand, as if it has taken a deeper breath than usual. The silence is deafening, even the refrigerator seems to have fallen silent. On the kitchen board is a notebook sheet. A week of idleness, that's what David jokingly called the trip. Below it is a bulleted list: water the succulents, pick up the dry cleaning, check the roof insurance. I outline the line water and immediately put down the marker. Not today. From the kettle, which I turned on mechanically, a thin whistle escapes, but I remove it before it gains strength. In the window, a standard picture: a blue dish of the sky, white bodies of neighbors' vans, stripes of lawn mowers along the curbs. All I have to do is blink, and it all seems like a postcard, foreign and laminated. I take a sip of coffee, it cooled faster than my thoughts, and wander from room to room, checking if anything has changed. Everything is the same. The same suddenly begins to grate on the ear. By noon, I have cleaned the sink to a mirror shine, but there is no satisfaction. The water rolls off the metal just as feelings roll off the heart, leaving no trace. I put a pot on the stove, intending to cook rice for a late lunch, and pull chicken broth out of the refrigerator. The tile clicks, igniting the gas, and this sharp, almost aggressive sound seems to me like an improvised drum beat in a silent orchestra. I catch myself humming softly an old Fleetwood Mac hit, out of habit, to fill the voids. And then, so suddenly that I break off the phrase mid-word, the doorbell rings. One short ding, and silence again. I am motionless. No one should come on Sunday. My heart beats an extra beat, like a drummer out of rhythm. The towel falls onto the table. I make my way to the door, looking at myself on the way. Is my hair combed? Is the light gloss still on my lips? All this rattling against the backdrop of the thought, what if something happened to David on the highway? The edge of anxiety is already cutting when I turn the handle. A man stands behind the screen door. Tall, in a grey t-shirt, jeans as if fused with slender legs. Hair the color of wet sand is slightly tousled by the wind. In his hands, nothing, not even a phone. He smiles, and this smile, uncertain but warm, takes me straight back 15 years. "Mrs. Morris?" he asks, although we both know that he recognized me. And I answer, as if his name is already on the tip of my tongue, just waiting to break free, "Caleb. Caleb Wyatt." He nods, shifting his gaze to my bare feet, as if apologizing for making me come out without shoes. "I was nearby," he says, "and suddenly realized that I couldn't drive past your house." His voice is calm, a baritone without forcing, but there is a slight vibration in it, as if he had been rehearsing the phrase all the way and is still not satisfied with the result. "Caleb. The very boy who once built a primitive catapult in the backyard of my old swings to throw pomegranate balls into the neighbor's pool, who took my Emma to the prom. Emma. I blinked as if from dust. My daughter left 4 years ago, too quickly, too unexpectedly, and Caleb and I haven't seen each other since the funeral. For a few seconds, we look at each other through the thin mesh. My reflection in the glass is blurred, as if I myself am a ghost in my own house. Of course, come in, I say, and I am amazed at how hoarse my voice is. I open the door wider. Caleb enters carefully, as if into a museum where everything is forbidden to touch. The smell of soap and wood shavings follows him, knocking against something inside me. I unexpectedly. He begins and stumbles. It's okay, I smile, already hearing how my heart beats a fast jazz. We stand in the hallway, and the distance between us flickers not with air, but with something denser. I see a light shadow run across his face. As his gaze slides over the family photos on the wall, he smiles at the picture, where David holds Emma on his shoulders by a mountain stream. The house hasn't changed, he whispers. Like good intentions, I reply, surprising myself with the remark. Literally a minute later, we are already in the kitchen. The gas is still burning under the pot, condensation is dripping from the lid, gladly that at least the food gives the house a sound. Tea. I offer, taking a fragile glass out of the sideboard. If you have coffee, I would be glad. I pour a new portion of water into the coffee maker, an action learned over the years, but each gesture seems as if for the first time. I scoop a spoonful of ground beans, flinch when the spoon clinks against the ceramic. Behind me, Caleb's quiet steps. He doesn't sit down, just leans against the island, and I feel his gaze between my shoulder blades. The filter sighs loudly, yielding to the bitter steam, and I ask, trying to sound ordinary, what brought you to our area? You lived in Seattle now, right? 2 months ago, I got an offer at the Denver Museum of Modern Art. I'm curating an exhibition of young sculptors. Your path is predictably creative, I smile. Not a hint of pride, Caleb shrugs, as if it's all a coincidence. I'm just trying to do what Emma convinced me to do, not to waste hours on what you don't believe in. Her daughter's name, spoken by him for the first time aloud after so many years, clicks in the back of my head like a closet door, inside which there is too much air. I hold the cup with both hands so as not to drop it. Are you in town for long? While the installation is going on. Probably another week or 2. He says a week or 2, and inside me, a strange thought suddenly forms. I have about the same amount of silence in the house ahead of me. An uninvited parallel burns slightly. The coffee is ready, dark, thick. I serve it to him and myself. We silently bring the mugs to our lips. The clock on the wall ticks quietly, but now the marks are measured by our sips. I am the first to break the silence, although I intended to let him speak. I'm glad you dropped by. You always have a place here. Sometimes it seems like Emma is about to come in laughing with some new project. I often hear her voice, he agrees, especially when I close my eyes in the museum halls where it's too empty. My gaze catches his hands. The grip on the mug is firm, the tendons protrude under his fingers. A scene flashes before my eyes. Teenage Caleb laughs as Emma draws a forever summer on his palm with a marker. A tattoo without a needle. She said that was why they lived, to be a reminder to each other of things we are afraid to forget. There is no tattoo on his skin now, but a faint trace seems to remain in my imagination. The picture in the window changes, the sunspot crawls lower, as if time has decided to speed up. I realize that I have been silent for too long. The silence hums like a taut strap. Caleb takes a sip and almost whispers, "You look different." I don't know if that's the right word. I raise my eyebrows, involuntarily. Maybe I should look in the mirror more often. Mirrors are too literal, he replies. I mean that. You glow. Even if it's a slightly sad light. The phrase hits me more accurately than an arrow. Light, sadness, radiance, all these words I have long applied only to the evening lanterns on the neighboring street, but never to myself. Something inside me unfolds, resembling a forgotten inhale before sleep. I turn away, as if checking if the coffee is running away, but I realize that I am doing this to calm my reddened cheeks. My fingers slip off the pot handle, the clink against the metal grate of the stove sounds too loud in the silence of our conversation. He puts down the mug, covers my hand with his briefly, almost imperceptibly, but a charge runs through my skin. He doesn't say a word, the gesture is barely noticeable, but there is more charge in it than in a whole lecture on feelings. I sharply inhale, turn my palm, breaking the contact at this moment, the refrigerator door slams shut by itself, a draft or fate, and I flinch at the sudden sound. Sorry, he exhales, I didn't mean to. It's okay, I answer too quickly. We both take a step back, each to our own boundary line, until the walls touch. We look at each other, and for the first time in a long time, I don't know how to make the next move safe. Outside, the neighbor's pickup, loaded with boards, drives by, the screech of the wheels cuts through the street, and this brings me back to the here and now. Caleb, do you want dinner? I ask, feeling my gathered voice begin to obey again. I have chicken fillet and rice. I doubt I'll eat it all alone. He smiles, but the smile is smaller than before, as if the world has squeezed it between its fingers. If it's not too much trouble, I'd be glad. I go to the cabinet for a second cutting board. My gaze lingers for a moment on the reflection in the glossy door of the oven, a woman in jeans and a linen shirt, slightly tousled chestnut hair, eyes in which the embers that smoldered for a long time finally received a dose of oxygen. This reflection holds my gaze longer than any mirror has in recent years. The silence, which seems safe, has cracked, and I stand on its edge, not knowing if the ground will hold. And yet, I reach for the chicken fillet, the rice, the salt, the pepper. To the movements that know how to mask the trembling of hands. And Caleb, on the contrary, masks nothing. He stands in the doorway, and his eyes, a silent promise that the crack will not close again. A draft brings the smell of lavender from the porch. I hear my own pulse. The chapter ends with the rice boiling, and I, without turning away, finally allow myself to linger my gaze on the man who was once just my daughter's friend, and today became the angles of my unspoken truth. The smell of jasmine rice and chicken in a creamy wine sauce warmly fills the kitchen, mixing with the aroma of freshly ground coffee. The gas burns evenly, the flame envelops the bottom of the pan, like the moon the thin edge of the earth's shadow. I hear Caleb's even breathing behind me before I catch his rustle. The denim fabric scratches the edge of the marble island as he moves a little closer. We keep a safe distance, but the feeling is as if a string is stretched between us, and the slightest movement will vibrate in every nerve ending. Do you always cook like this? He asks, leaning his elbow on the countertop. His voice is low, carefree, but there is a tension to every gesture in his tone. When it's just me in the house, I answer, stirring the sauce with a wooden spoon. Food becomes not a recipe, but almost a meditation. Sounds like you're talking through pots. Sometimes it's the only thing that answers. I smile, and hear my laughter quiet, unfamiliar. We talk about little things. About how Lane I-70 was unexpectedly closed, how the museum building turned out to be colder than any refrigerator, how an owl settled on his mother's new farm in Oregon, and now she wakes up to its hooting, like an old-fashioned alarm clock. Each stroke seems to expand the fabric of memories in which Emma was once woven, and I feel that her name hovers here, circles around us, but does not yet descend. Caleb brings the mug to his lips. The coffee steam touches his eyelashes, and he closes his eyes. At this moment, I notice, under his left eye is a thin, barely noticeable wrinkle, a trace of the habit of smiling not with all his teeth, but with the corner of his mouth. Once this curve made him a mischievous boy, now it gives him seriousness, as if life had dusted his expression with a thin layer of meanings. He notices my gaze and puts down the mug. "I probably look too straightforward," he says. "You've always been able to read silence, Mrs. Evelyn." He uncertainly breaks off the Mrs. as if removing an extra edge between us. I turn the chicken breasts. The oil sizzles, releasing a thin cloud of steam. "Silence sometimes speaks louder than words," I answer. "But reading it and understanding are different things." "Then allow me to ask if I don't understand." There is no youthful audacity in his voice. There is reverence. Or is it the confidence of a man who knows the value of a clear intention? I nod without looking and transfer the rice to a serving bowl. Caleb clears the mugs as if this house still remembers the steps of his childhood. The movements are precise, almost imperceptible, not a single extra sound. We sit across from each other at the island. The light from the window is already flickering with orange highlights. The evening is slowly trying on its velvet cloak. Caleb looks around the shelves, David's books on architecture, ceramic bowls that I once bought at a fair, a portrait of Emma in a maple frame. He does not linger on the photo for more than a second, as if bowing to the memory. "Do you remember how Emma made us read her play in the backyard?" His voice becomes softer, barely audible. I smile, letting go of the fork. "And you and David played the villains, and she herself played the eternally suffering heroine. We forgot our lines and shouted them from the sheet," he smirks. "And she prompted from the bushes, but claimed that it was the director's remarks of the wind." We both laugh, and the laughter sounds as if it revives an invisible screen in front of us, where little Emma, in a pale blue dress, twirls a plastic crown. The laughter subsides, but the light from the memory remains. It lies in the air like pollen under a lamp. I notice Caleb running his finger along the edge of the plate, as if erasing an invisible crumb. His fingers stop, and he looks up, suddenly serious. "You know." He pauses, as if looking for a deeper word. "It all smells of coriander and patience here." "Is that good or?" "It's like the house is on your side, even when you don't believe in it," he explains slowly. "Sometimes I go into friends' apartments, they are full of furniture, but empty. And here the air is heavy with history." I press my palm to the cup to hide the unwanted tremor. "History is not always a compliment," I exhale. "Sometimes it makes it hard to breathe." He leans forward in his chair, but does not cross the boundary of the table, only with his gaze. "Maybe because you don't let it become real. You keep it like a pressed flower," he says almost in a whisper. "Beautiful, but you can't inhale the aroma of a living petal." The phrase stings like a thin splinter under the skin. I pretend to be focused on the food, although I don't taste it. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a car door slams. The silence of the kitchen shrinks again, tightening the space around us more tightly. He is the first to break the pause. "You look beautiful, Evelyn," he says evenly, without a catch, but I hear a restrained movement in his voice, as if he is holding the reins of his own emotions. The words freeze in the air. I feel their weight on my shoulders like a shawl, and I don't know if it's warm or heavy. "Which part is beautiful?" I ask, hiding my embarrassment behind light irony. "My al dente fillet, or my hair that hasn't seen a hairdresser since December?" "The part where you look at the pot, as if you can persuade it to reveal the secrets of the universe," he answers seriously. Then a smile, a slight curve of the lips. "And, yes, the part where your hair catches the fire of the sunset." At this moment, the air thickens to the consistency of syrup. I hear my heart beating an extra beat, and to avoid showing it, I put my palm on the countertop. The cool marble anchors me. I take a breath, slow, trying to inhale the aroma anew. Yes, it smells of coriander, patience, and something else, musk of fresh soap. My throat dries up. Is that wine? He asks, noticing a bottle of Chardonnay on the buffet. I nod and get up, glad for the opportunity to move. I uncork it, a light pop, and the cork rolls to the edge. I pour into 2 glasses. The wine glows golden, reflecting the lamps. I hand him 1 glass, our fingers almost touch, just barely, like a spark on a bare wire. We clink glasses, a soft chime of glass. To what? I ask. To Sunday, which wasn't as quiet as expected, he answers. I take a sip, feeling the tart freshness of citrus on my palate, and suddenly realize that here, in my own home, I feel something more than comfort. I feel a dangerous, alluring more, as if the world has slightly opened the door to a room that I have long been afraid to enter. We have dinner leisurely. The spoons clink softly, as if whispering. The conversation meanders. About sculptures made from recycled machine parts. About an exhibition of a Japanese photographer in Seattle. About what David calls architecture squared, local attempts to build cube houses for wealthy minimalists. We laugh, and every time our eyes meet, I feel a slight dizziness, as if on the children's swings that Emma loved until dusk. When the plates are empty, Caleb carefully collects them and takes them to the sink. I am about to help, but he waves his hand, allow me, and I unexpectedly agree, feeling how pleasant it is not to be the mistress of the moment, but a guest in my own desires. The water rustles as he washes the dishes carelessly but thoroughly, as if the process itself is more important than the result. I watch the line of his shoulders, how the soft fabric of the t-shirt stretches across his back. A shameful warmth rises to my face. I turn away to the window to give myself a breath. The spring evening outside is tinged with the color of a ripe peach. In the distance, lanterns light up, one, another, a third, as if someone's heart is learning to beat again, with a light alphabet. I hear a soft sound behind me. Caleb puts the plates in the dryer and turns off the tap. I've been wanting to ask. He hands me a clean napkin to wipe my wet hands. What are you drawing now? Nothing, I answer too quickly. The brushes haven't touched the paper. A year. More? Then it's a crime on a state scale. He smiles, and there's more than a joke in his smile. Emma always said that your watercolors make the shadows breathe. I fall silent. My heart closes like a seashell. Sometimes shadows should be silent, I whisper. He nods slowly, not in argument, but in understanding. And then, so quietly that the words barely reach my hearing, and yet, if you ever want to remember how the paper absorbs the first line. I would like to watch. The words fall to the kitchen floor and do not break, they settle like dust, and each speck reflects the light of the lamp. I feel a tremor in my fingertips. Not from fear, but from something like gratitude, for the fact that someone sees me through the layer of years, not as a function of a family album, but as a person of flesh, longing, and color. The clock shows 7:30, but time feels stretched, like fresh dough on yeast. It bounces, expanding until the room is filled with warmth and anticipation. Caleb wipes his hands with a towel, looks around, and suddenly catches my gaze. There are a few steps of emptiness between us. He takes half a step, freezes. I feel the warmth rush to my face, and my palm drops to the countertop. A new anchor is needed. I need to. I begin, but the words break off. What do I need? Return to David's list. Rearrange the books by the color of their spines. Or just remind myself that the ground under my feet is not trembling. Caleb lowers his gaze as if understanding. I've overstayed, he says. Thank you for dinner and for. He searches for the word, for trusting in the taste for risk. You remember the way out, I try to joke, but my voice breaks too quickly. We walk to the door slowly. In the hallway, the dim crimson light of the night light draws shadow patterns of stained glass on the walls. He turns around, and I see his pupils dilated, shadow or what burns inside. Evelyn, he whispers, if I could erase with one word what I just felt, I would. Because I don't want to hurt you. My name in his mouth sounds like a song without accompaniment. I open my mouth and close it, not finding a phrase. At this moment, the silence, again the silence, roars louder than all possible orchestras. I do what I didn't plan. I reach out and touch his wrist, just barely. He doesn't move, but the warmth under the skin beats with a rhythm that I hear even through my own pounding. We stand like this for one heartbeat, two. And I lower my hand. Be careful, the road is narrow near the canyon, I say finally. Always, he nods. His smile is more sad than joyful. Thank you for dinner, Evelyn. I close the door behind him and lean my forehead against the cold wood. The engine of his car purrs, the tires softly drive away. Part of me wants to throw open the door and shout, come back, but I just press harder against the door, as if it's the only barrier between me and the new outline of the world. In the kitchen, the rice cools, the pot is empty. I turn off the light, and the house expands again in the dark, but now the silence is different. It rings like a high frequency ringing in the ears after a loud concert, a reminder that there was music, and its echo will not leave the cranial box for a long time. Before going to bed, I write one sentence in a notebook that had long been gathering dust in a drawer. Sometimes one look turns the picture upside down, and the world doesn't become different. It's just that the eyes refuse to believe that it was ever the same before. The ink glistens until it dries. I put down the pen, take off my glasses, and lie down in bed. The rustle of the blanket is the only sound. And yet, a quiet chord plays inside me, as if someone has found the first key of an unexplored melody, and I, holding my breath, am waiting to see if he will continue. Morning comes without a knock, like an uninvited and almost unwanted guest. I wake up before the alarm. The grey pre-dawn light is already sliding across the ceiling, laying a thin diagonal from the window to the wardrobe. The room smells of washed cotton, and a little of the stale silence that hides between the folds of the blanket when you sleep alone. I throw off the cover, step barefoot onto the cool parquet, and freeze, as if the house is listening to the first breath of the new day. The coffee drips slower than usual today. Each drop hits the glass carafe, echoing loudly in the kitchen, a mechanical heart that pumps aroma instead of blood. I cup the mug with both hands, warming my fingers, and look out the window. There's the same suburb, but as if shot through a different lens, slightly blurred and too quiet. Not a single neighbor has taken out their dog yet, not a single school bus has floated by with its yellow belly to the corner. I try to focus on the plans, water the succulents, pick up the dry cleaning, check the roof insurance. But the list, which yesterday seemed like a simple path to peace, today looks like someone else's route. The words blur between water and pick up, an unnamed think is inserted, and the thought of it presses on my ribs from the inside. The phone vibrates softly on the table. The screen flashes, Caleb. My heart breaks into an uninvited beat. Sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable yesterday. I couldn't carry what I carry inside anymore. I won't demand anything. But every word was true. The letters shine as if cut from the morning itself. I grip the mug tighter. My fingers hover over the keyboard, my brain searches for a safe line, but only an honest one comes out, we need to talk. Not here. Send. The heart seems to stop for a second. The answer arrives before I can take a deeper breath, tell me where and when. I'll come. The sun has already gained height when I park near the Chavez Park Botanical Garden. I chose this place intentionally, the glass greenhouses and paths wet from the morning watering smell of earth and steam, and the humid air between the palm trees muffles any extra sound. Here, emotions won't creep up too loudly. Caleb is waiting at the entrance to the fern greenhouse. A dark green sweater hugs his shoulders, jeans occasionally catching the reflected light. He notices me immediately. There is a slight nervousness in his gait, but also the purpose that distinguishes an adult man from a boy. I approach, and my heart beats at an impermissible speed again. "Hi," he says softly, as if we are standing in the middle of a library, and the silence itself is the guard. "Hi," I reply. "Shall we walk?" He nods. We step onto the stone path, and the gravel crunches under our soles, setting a rhythm that must be listened to so as not to say something too soon. The air inside the greenhouse is thick, tropical monstera leaves hang like curtains. Drops of condensation occasionally break away from the metal beams and hit the broad leaves, a high, ringing sound, similar to single shots. We pass the orchid alley, and I suddenly realize that the smell here reminds me of the perfume Emma used in her last year of college, pungent, slightly medicinal, with a hint of melon. The memory hits unexpectedly. I clench the strap of my bag, as if not to step out of the frame. At the fork, we stop. In the distance, under a glass dome, a stream with golden koi flows. Children, pressing against the wall, trace the spotted shadows with their fingers. I notice for the first time how the children's laughter outside seems muffled, as if wrapped in cotton. We are in a different acoustic world. Caleb opens his palms in front of him, like a person ready to surrender. "I long thought that coming here was like picking at an old wound," he begins. "But wounds heal if you touch them gently, not if you pretend they don't exist." I listen, feeling something between fear and relief growing inside me. "When I saw you yesterday." He pauses, his gaze drops to his knees. "For the first time since those funerals, I thought that the past might not be a sentence. That it can give a start to what has not yet been written." I sigh. The sound comes out hoarsely. "Caleb, I don't know what's happening to me," I say. "Part of me wants to return yesterday, before your knock on the door. The other is afraid that if I turn back, something inside me will fall asleep again." "You have the right to sleep and wake up when you want," he answers. "I don't want to wake you by force. I just want to be nearby, while you decide what to do with this morning light." We stand in the hallway, and the distance between us flickers not with air, but with something denser. The reflection of the light on the water shimmers like a mirage, and for a moment, it feels like we are the only two people in the world. We sit down on an old leather sofa with brass rivets. Through the huge windows, the city center shines, skyscrapers flash with logos, and above them, the red neon of a crane spins like a beacon. Inside, only one table lamp is lit. Its yellow halo illuminates fragments of pencil sketches and my hand, which Caleb still holds, not letting go. "You know, as a child, I was afraid of the dark," he confesses after a long pause. "Once, Emma taught me a trick. If you look into the darkest corner for a long time, it becomes lighter. The brain draws light where it wants to find it. And I thought that was called hope," I smile. "Let it be so," he agrees. "Today, you entered my darkest corner, Evelyn. And I no longer need to draw light. You brought it." The words fall softly, but as if they hum in the blood. I close my eyes for a second, feeling the fatigue of weeks, the fatigue of years, leave my muscles. When I open them, he is no longer looking at me, he is looking out the window where the lilac reflection of the lights falls on the glass. On his face, I read not victory, not a bit. There is humility before something greater than both of us. "I need to go home," I say. "I have a day planned. Or it should be planned." He stands up, not trying to touch. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for listening," I reply. We go out into the open sky. The May wind is a little cooler than the humid air of the greenhouse. It smells of pine resin and car tires. We pass by a bed of tulips, and the petals, glossy after watering, rustle as if they want to whisper something. At the gate, I stop. In my hand, the phone is still warm, and I suddenly know what I will say. I will write when I can speak again. No matter how much time passes, he replies, I will be here. Just don't lie to yourself, Evelyn. Lies are like honey that crystallizes quickly and tears the tongue. With these words, he touches my hand with his fingertips, not the palm, but only the air above the skin. The gesture is so light that I almost doubt it was there. But the warmth remains, like a trace of a sunbeam. I get into the car, and when the rearview mirror reflects his figure, in a sweater, in the speckled shadow of leaves, I suddenly realize, he doesn't take a single step in my direction. He just waits until I decide where to look next, at the road or back. The road home flies by like a silent film, signs, traffic lights, lane markings, all without sound. Only my thoughts rumble, drowning out the engine. Do you feel alive? The question tingles the skin. Again and again. I park by the porch, and when I close the door behind me, the house sounds different. It's not empty, it's filled with a subtle vibration, as if the walls remember that there is now a double rhythm inside me. I put the phone on the table. No notifications. But they are not needed, the conversation continues inside, in the echoes. My fingers reach for the buffet drawer on their own. There, under the tablecloths and spare batteries, lies a thin box with my watercolor tubes. I run my fingers over the dusty lid. Mirrors are too literal, Caleb said. Paint doesn't lie. Paper doesn't lie. And suddenly I realize, today I will open this box. Not for a masterpiece, not for anyone. But to check if the shadows really know how to breathe when given fresh air. I turn on the lamp, put a clean sheet, and sit for a minute, doing nothing. I hear the house listening. Then I squeeze out the first drop of indigo onto the palette. The round drop trembles, like a heart that is still learning a new rhythm. While it doesn't spread, I whisper softly, I'm alive. And the paper responds with a barely audible rustle, as the brush touches it for the first time in a long, long year. 3 days have passed, just enough for the emptiness in the house to become tangibly dense, as if someone had hung heavy theater curtains in all the rooms. David won't return until Friday. The calendar repeats this like a mantra, but the number Friday has ceased to be a coordinate of time for me, it has turned into a resonant stone around my neck. During these 3 days, I haven't received a single message, or a quick how are you from Caleb, and the silence turned out to be much louder than any words. It cut, scratched, and, contrary to logic, attracted. I tried to cook vegetable soup, reread my favorite detective novel, even paint the porch railings in a new Scandinavian maple color, but the brush in my hand kept freezing in the air as my thoughts, like an invisible arrow, returned to him. He will wait, but do I myself know how to wait? By Wednesday noon, my patience snapped like thin glass. Putting aside the masking tape, I heard my own voice. A quiet but formal order, get in the car and find out if he is really still nearby, or just the echo of yesterday's revelations. Caleb's loft was easy to find, the top floor of a pre-war brick building on the outskirts of Reno, a former warehouse converted into housing for creatives. Before knocking, I caught the smell of warm wood mixed with notes of cedar and wet cement. The humid asphalt rain had just passed through the area. My heart beat against my ribs, as if it wanted to get inside faster than my feet. The door opened almost immediately, as if he had been standing by the threshold, catching the steps. In the dim light of the hallway, Caleb's face seemed a little paler than usual, his eyes darker, like coffee without cream, boiling under a thin film of anxiety. I didn't expect to see you so soon, he said, and his voice trembled slightly. I didn't expect it myself, I admitted, entering. Somewhere the logic has disappeared. The loft was spacious but not cold, covered with a mosaic of Kilim rugs and scattered books. It resembled a living workshop more than a typical bachelor's pad. One wall was entirely glass, beyond which the evening Denver panorama shone. On the opposite wall stood shelves welded from old rails. On them were black and white photos of Emma, ceramic sculpture sketches, and a glass bowl with sea stones. I lingered for a moment on a photo where our daughter holds a kite, a shot taken by Caleb, I remember. He then called the frame light in a stretched moment. "It smells like your youth here," I breathed out. "It smells like fear and hope here," he corrected gently. "And also linseed oil." I was priming a frame for a new piece. We stood in the middle of the room like two people who had accidentally met on a bridge where there was an abyss on both sides, and no one knew who should take the first step. Somewhere outside, a distant train rumbled, repeating a long, low sound. "I think," I began, "that if I leave here without saying everything, I won't be able to breathe as before." He nodded slowly, as if giving permission to continue, but the phrase broke off. There wasn't enough courage to call the whirlwind in my chest by its name. Then Caleb took half a step closer. The distance between us shrank to the width of a breath. He raised his hand, but stopped in the air, waiting for permission. I nodded almost imperceptibly, and his fingers touched my cheek so gently that the touch seemed ghostly. The warmth coming from this point seemed to instantly crank up the temperature in the room. "Tell me to stop if you're not ready," he whispered. But I didn't say a word. Because at that moment, all the silence of the previous years cracked from the crack. Longing, desire, gratitude burst out all at once. Feelings disorderly covered me, like a torn sail covers the deck during a storm. And I did what I was even afraid to think about. I stepped towards him myself. The first kiss was not hot, no. It was focused, as if we were both asking a question: is this really our home? Or just a temporary station? Caleb's lips trembled slightly, his hand still held my waist carefully, as if afraid to break a porcelain figurine. But this tremor was strength, in it. I felt the reverence that I hadn't experienced since my youth. I didn't notice when the tears came, one, a second, a third. They fell on the collar of Caleb's sweater, and he didn't wipe them away, only ran his palm along my back, slowing down my breathing, as if adjusting it to my disordered rhythm. Somewhere above, a swallow glided loudly under the vaults, and the air rippled. "Are you okay?" he asked, moving away just enough to see my eyes. I nodded and laughed through the tears. "I'm okay in a way I haven't been in a long time. It's just..." The world suddenly became louder than I remembered, and my eyes are unaccustomed to the brightness. He smiled, a full smile for the first time all evening, with that very boyish dimple, but the smile was softened by wrinkles around the eyes. Now it was the joy of an adult, conscious, with a touch of care. "Then let the world get used to you too," he replied. "We can just sit." Without unnecessary words. We sat down on an old leather sofa with brass rivets. Through the huge windows, the city center shone, skyscrapers flashed with logos, and above them, the red neon of a crane spun like a beacon. Inside, only one table lamp was lit, its yellow halo illuminated fragments of pencil sketches and my hand, which Caleb still held without letting go. "You know, as a child, I was afraid of the dark," he confessed after a long pause. "Once, Emma taught me a trick. If you look into the darkest corner for a long time, it becomes lighter. The brain draws light where it wants to find it. And I thought that was called hope," I smiled. "Let it be so," he agreed. "Today, you entered my darkest corner, Evelyn. And I no longer need to draw light. You brought it." The words fell softly, but as if they hummed in the blood. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling the fatigue of weeks, the fatigue of years, leave my muscles. When I opened them, he was no longer looking at me, he was looking out the window where the lilac reflection of the lights fell on the glass. On his face, I read not victory, not a bit. There was humility before something greater than both of us. I need to go home, I said. I have a day planned. Or it should be planned. He stood up without trying to touch me. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening, I replied. We went out into the open sky. The May wind was a little cooler than the humid air of the greenhouse. It smelled of pine resin and car tires. We passed by a bed of tulips, and the petals, glossy after watering, rustled as if they wanted to whisper something. At the gate, I stopped. In my hand, the phone was still warm, and I suddenly knew what I would say. I will write when I can speak again. No matter how much time passes, he replied, I will be here. Just don't lie to yourself, Evelyn. Lies are like honey that crystallizes quickly and tears the tongue. With these words, he touched my hand with his fingertips, not the palm, but only the air above the skin. The gesture was so light that I almost doubted it was there. But the warmth remained, like a trace of a sunbeam. I got into the car, and when the rearview mirror reflected his figure, in a sweater, in the speckled shadow of leaves, I suddenly realized, he didn't take a single step in my direction. He just waited until I decided where to look next, at the road or back. The road home flew by like a silent film, signs, traffic lights, lane markings, all without sound. Only my thoughts rumbled, drowning out the engine. Do you feel alive? The question tingled the skin. Again and again. I parked by the porch, and when I closed the door behind me, the house sounded different. It wasn't empty, it was filled with a subtle vibration, as if the walls remembered that there was now a double rhythm inside me. I put the phone on the table. No notifications. But they weren't needed, the conversation continued inside, in the echoes. My fingers reached for the buffet drawer on their own. There, under the tablecloths and spare batteries, lay a thin box with my watercolor tubes. I ran my fingers over the dusty lid. Mirrors are too literal, Caleb had said. Paint doesn't lie. Paper doesn't lie. And suddenly I realized, today I would open this box. Not for a masterpiece, not for anyone. But to check if the shadows really knew how to breathe when given fresh air. I turned on the lamp, placed a clean sheet, and sat for a minute, doing nothing. I heard the house listening. Then I squeezed out the first drop of indigo onto the palette. The round drop trembled, like a heart still learning a new rhythm. While it didn't spread, I whispered softly, I'm alive. And the paper responded with a barely audible rustle, as the brush touched it for the first time in a long, long year. Friday rolls in like a wave promised by a storm warning, cumbersome, heavy, and yet inevitable. From the very morning, the house listens keenly to any sound outside, a street truck, a lawnmower motor, the slam of someone else's trunk, anything could be a sign that David is returning. I wander between the rooms as if arranging forgotten pieces on a chessboard. I straighten the blanket in our bedroom, hang his shirt on the hanger more neatly than necessary, polish the glass in the portrait frame to a shine, even though there are no fingerprints there. While my hands are busy, my thoughts try to brew composure, but under the calm surface, an invisible fire licks the edges of the vessel. The clock shows 4:12 p.m., when the familiar engine growls down the street outside. The handbrake clicks, the pickup door slams suspiciously loud, as if someone is slapping the water to check its depth. On the driveway, a roll of spinning rods clatters. I glide like a shadow to the window. David, tanned to the color of a walnut shell, shakes his hand on his shorts and throws me a wide, tired smile through the glass, the one that always meant, I'm home, and everything that was important on the road is left behind. My heart responds with a double beat, not with joy and not with fear, but with a mixture of both, thick as unstirred honey. He enters, smelling of pine resin, stale river water, and that sociable sweat that isn't ashamed of friends living in the same boat for a week. The keys fall into the bowl on the nightstand. Together we look up at the metallic clink, as if at the shot of a starting pistol. Evie. He hugs me, as always, with one arm, because the other is dragging a duffel bag. I let my shoulders press into his side, add a dutiful kiss on the cheek, pure automatic, not warm, but not icy either. He doesn't notice the difference. The habit works like a well-oiled hinge. Did you catch anything? I ask, stepping back. 3 rainbow trout. Hector was fishing, and I was looking for a spot with the fish finder. I'll tell you over dinner. Oh, you repainted the railings again. Perfectly even. The compliment pours out like salt from an overturned salt shaker. I feel ashamed that the first thought is to measure how long ago he last noticed changes in me, not in something external. I look away. Dinner is prepared on autopilot, baked hake fillet, baby potatoes in herbs, and arugula salad. I move precisely and quickly, like a waitress in a closing bistro. David tells stories, the wind in the canyons, how Hector revved the engine, roaring campfire tales. I laugh in the right places, give out really. And wow, but don't let them in. In the center of my chest, another memory unfolds, Caleb's "Don't lie to yourself," and it ripples my breath. After the second glass of Pinot Grigio, David falls silent, as if the air has run out. He looks at me over the rim of the glass, squinting. At this moment, I see in him not a traveling husband, but a man with whom a long, worn life has been lived, and the stripes of worn varnish on both of us suddenly catch the eye. You seem different, he says. Not an accusation, but an attempt to probe unfamiliar ground. Different. I repeat, tasting the word in my mouth. Maybe a little. He nods, accepting the a little as if he has been given not the whole map, but enough not to get lost. Later, when the dishwasher is humming and the windows reflect the dark garden, we go upstairs. The lights go out one by one. Each click is like a drawn curtain in the newsreel of one day. In the bedroom, I change with my back to him, feeling the fabric of the t-shirt pull my shoulder blades forward. He drops his shorts, rustles something in the nightstand. The mattress creaks under him, inviting to continue the routine. But my body doesn't respond. Inside there is life at a different voltage. I lie down, leaving a strip of coldness on the sheet between us. The ceiling casts a grey shadow, as if someone is deliberately holding a flashlight outside. David, I whisper. The words get stuck in my throat like an unsecured bead. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Seriously. He doesn't answer for a long time. Maybe he's gathering words, maybe he's hiding fatigue. Of course, he exhales into the darkness. Let's talk tomorrow. The darkness returns to its density now. It's different. It doesn't fill the room, but hangs over us like a heavy blanket that can't be shaken off. Saturday, 9:07 a.m. I find him in the small study behind the kitchen, the very one where a Wattman board with our mortgage calculations once stood, and now only Prairie Architecture catalogs gather dust. David is leafing through a fishing magazine, but his gaze slides past the pages. Coffee? I ask, putting down a mug. Thanks. He takes a sip as if gathering courage. What did you want to talk about? I sit down opposite, on Emma's chair, still childish, with scratches from her markers. Between us is a table, chipped at the edges. I suddenly understand all the symbolism. Everything that once brought us together has now become a boundary, where we will have to define something new. David. I exhale slowly, I love you. And I respect the road we've traveled. But it seems we've lost ourselves somewhere along the kilometer of endless lists and quiet compromises. He listens, his lips tightly closed. When you left, I realized how little living movement there was in me. I I search for the word, I became invisible even to myself. And if I'm honest, I've wanted to tell you this for a long time, but I was afraid. I see three states at once stirring in him, offense, confusion, and relief, the latter, perhaps, the most unexpected. You're talking as if it's only your loss, he replies, as if I haven't felt the same. I just thought that silence was a normal continuation of long love. And I thought that silence was the price of stability, I admit. We freeze. The clock on the wall ticks, an extra metronome of someone else's conversation. What now? He asks, his fingers fiddling with the edge of the magazine. The paper rustles dryly under their movement, the sound of uncertainty. We need honesty, I say. My heart presses against my ribs, but the truth refuses to hide again. I talk to someone with whom I feel alive. But it's not about him. It's about what happened to me. I can't go back to the previous half-sleep. He closes his eyes as if the bright light hurts. You cheated on me. His voice doesn't accuse, it only asks for a clear coordinate. I allowed myself to feel. The words struggle to find their way. We only talked. He looks differently. I don't say the name, it would be an extra nail. Silence turns into a bell. David stands up, walks around the room like on the deck of a schooner, slowly, but with an internal storm. I freeze, afraid that he will leave, slam the door, it will be easier than facing the damage directly. But he stops by the window, puts his palm on the jamb. I know, he says unexpectedly. I know that we've long been like two neighboring islands. I also lived on autopilot. I tried to fill the void with novice wind, fishing, work. He turns around, his eyes are shining. I thought that was enough. Something crunches in my chest, either old ice or a splintered feeling of guilt. I stand up, approach closer, but don't touch, there remains a palm's distance between us, the same one that has been felt for years. We can try to figure out what's still alive, I say. As a couple or separately. But I need the truth. I don't want to hide my wounds under a layer of acrylic. He looks for a long time, as if reading not only my words, but also how they tremble in the air. Finally, he nods. Therapy? He asks. Maybe. I shake my head. Or a pause. The main thing is not to pretend. We both exhale, someone invisible has opened the window, and the warm May air touches our faces. I hear the hum of a lawnmower on the neighboring street, the barking of a distant dog, ordinary life, but for me, these sounds seem crystal clear for the first time, as if shot through a different lens. David takes my hand. His fingers, familiar to the shoulder joint, suddenly seem new. At this moment, I feel three states at once stirring in him, offense, confusion, and an unexpected sense of relief. You're talking as if it's only your loss, he replies, as if I haven't felt the same way. I just thought that silence was a normal continuation of long love. And I thought that silence was the price of stability, I admit. We freeze. The clock on the wall ticks, an extra metronome of someone else's conversation. What now? He asks, his fingers fiddling with the edge of the magazine. The paper rustles dryly under their movement, the sound of uncertainty. We need honesty, I say. My heart presses against my ribs, but the truth refuses to hide again. I talk to someone with whom I feel alive. But it's not about him. It's about what happened to me. I can't go back to the previous half-sleep. He closes his eyes as if the bright light hurts. You cheated on me. His voice doesn't accuse, it only asks for a clear coordinate. I allowed myself to feel. The words struggle to find their way. We only talked. He looks differently. I don't say the name, it would be an extra nail. Silence turns into a bell. David stands up, walks around the room like on the deck of a schooner, slowly, but with an internal storm. I freeze, afraid that he will leave, slam the door. It will be easier than facing the damage directly. But he stops by the window, puts his palm on the jamb. I know, he says unexpectedly. I know that we've long been like two neighboring islands. I also lived on autopilot. I tried to fill the void with novice wind, fishing, work. He turns around, his eyes are shining. I thought that was enough. Something crunches in my chest, either old ice or a splintered feeling of guilt. I stand up, approach closer, but don't touch. There remains a palm's distance between us, the same one that has been felt for years. We can try to figure out what's still alive, I say. As a couple or separately. But I need the truth. I don't want to hide my wounds under a layer of acrylic. He looks for a long time, as if reading not only my words, but also how they tremble in the air. Finally, he nods. Therapy? He asks. Maybe, I say. Or a pause. The main thing is not to pretend. We both exhale. The lights go out one by one. Each click is like a drawn curtain in the newsreel of one day. In the bedroom, I change with my back to him, feeling the fabric of the t-shirt pull my shoulder blades forward. He drops his shorts, rustles something in the nightstand. The mattress creaks under him, inviting to continue the routine. But my body doesn't respond. Inside there is life at a different voltage. I lie down, leaving a strip of coldness on the sheet between us. The ceiling casts a grey shadow, as if someone is deliberately holding a flashlight outside. David, I whisper. The words get stuck in my throat like an unsecured bead. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Seriously. He doesn't answer for a long time. Maybe he's gathering words, maybe he's hiding fatigue. Of course, he exhales into the darkness. Let's talk tomorrow. The darkness returns to its density now. It's different. It doesn't fill the room, but hangs over us like a heavy blanket that can't be shaken off. Saturday, 9:07 a.m. I find him in the small study behind the kitchen, the very one where a Wattman board with our mortgage calculations once stood, and now only Prairie Architecture catalogs gather dust. David is leafing through a fishing magazine, but his gaze slides past the pages. Coffee? I ask, putting down a mug. Thanks. He takes a sip as if gathering courage. What did you want to talk about? I sit down opposite, on Emma's chair, still childish, with scratches from her markers. Between us is a table, chipped at the edges. I suddenly understand all the symbolism. Everything that once brought us together has now become a boundary, where we will have to define something new. David. I exhale slowly, I love you. And I respect the road we've traveled. But it seems we've lost ourselves somewhere along the kilometer of endless lists and quiet compromises. He listens, his lips tightly closed. When you left, I realized how little living movement there was in me. I searched for the word. I became invisible even to myself. And if I'm honest, I've wanted to tell you this for a long time, but I was afraid. I see three states at once stirring in him: offense, confusion, and relief, the latter, perhaps, the most unexpected. You're talking as if it's only your loss, he replies, as if I haven't felt the same. I just thought that silence was a normal continuation of long love. And I thought that silence was the price of stability, I admit. We freeze. The clock on the wall ticks, an extra metronome of someone else's conversation. What now? He asks, his fingers fiddling with the edge of the magazine. The paper rustles dryly under their movement, the sound of uncertainty. We need honesty, I say. My heart presses against my ribs, but the truth refuses to hide again. I talk to someone with whom I feel alive. But it's not about him. It's about what happened to me. I can't go back to the previous half-sleep. He closes his eyes as if the bright light hurts. You cheated on me. His voice doesn't accuse, it only asks for a clear coordinate. I allowed myself to feel. The words struggle to find their way. We only talked. He looks differently. I don't say the name, it would be an extra nail. Silence turns into a bell. David stands up, walks around the room like on the deck of a schooner, slowly, but with an internal storm. I freeze, afraid that he will leave, slam the door, it will be easier than facing the damage directly. But he stops by the window, puts his palm on the jamb. I know, he says unexpectedly. I know that we've long been like two neighboring islands. I also lived on autopilot. I tried to fill the void with novice wind, fishing, work. He turns around, his eyes are shining. I thought that was enough. Something crunches in my chest, either old ice or a splintered feeling of guilt. I stand up, approach closer, but don't touch, there remains a palm's distance between us, the same one that has been felt for years. We can try to figure out what's still alive, I say. As a couple or separately. But I need the truth. I don't want to hide my wounds under a layer of acrylic. He looks for a long time, as if reading not only my words, but also how they tremble in the air. Finally, he nods. Therapy? He asks. Maybe, I say. Or a pause. The main thing is not to pretend. We both exhale. The May wind outside is a little cooler than the humid air of the greenhouse. It smells of pine resin and car tires. We pass by a bed of tulips, and the petals, glossy after watering, rustle as if they want to whisper something. At the gate, I stop. In my hand, the phone is still warm, and I suddenly know what I will say. I will write when I can speak again. No matter how much time passes, he replies, I will be here. Just don't lie to yourself, Evelyn. Lies are like honey that crystallizes quickly and tears the tongue. With these words, he touches my hand with his fingertips, not the palm, but only the air above the skin. The gesture is so light that I almost doubt it was there. But the warmth remains, like a trace of a sunbeam. I get into the car, and when the rearview mirror reflects his figure, in a sweater, in the speckled shadow of leaves, I suddenly realize, he doesn't take a single step in my direction. He just waits until I decide where to look next, at the road or back. The road home flies by like a silent film, signs, traffic lights, lane markings, all without sound. Only my thoughts rumble, drowning out the engine. Do you feel alive? The question tingles the skin. Again and again. I park by the porch, and when I close the door behind me, the house sounds different. It's not empty, it's filled with a subtle vibration, as if the walls remember that there is now a double rhythm inside me. I put the phone on the table. No notifications. But they weren't needed, the conversation continued inside, in the echoes. My fingers reach for the buffet drawer on their own. There, under the tablecloths and spare batteries, lay a thin box with my watercolor tubes. I run my fingers over the dusty lid. Mirrors are too literal, Caleb had said. Paint doesn't lie. Paper doesn't lie. And suddenly I realize, today I would open this box. Not for a masterpiece, not for anyone. But to check if the shadows really knew how to breathe when given fresh air. I turn on the lamp, place a clean sheet, and sit for a minute, doing nothing. I hear the house listening. Then I squeeze out the first drop of indigo onto the palette. The round drop trembles, like a heart still learning a new rhythm. While it doesn't spread, I whisper softly, "I'm alive." And the paper responds with a barely audible rustle, as the brush touches it for the first time in a long, long year. Almost a month has passed. The days have spread out like warm honey, they moved slowly, but settled stickily, to the fingers, to the thoughts, to the heart. David and I lived in the same house, as if in a spacious vestibule of a railway station. Every evening we went to different platforms, and in the mornings we still greeted each other with the same good. Only now in this word and cautious dotted line was heard, not cement. On Sundays, we went to a family therapist together, and conversations about anger hidden under the rug and joy locked in the closet sometimes sounded scarier than any confessions. But I thanked the silence in these rooms. It no longer stamped excuses, it taught me to listen. Sometimes, behind all this cleaning of the soul, I caught relief. The pain, aching with every breath, proved that the ribs were still alive. And in the evenings, when David went to the workshop to sort out the tackle, or draw sketches of a new veranda, I opened the notebook, and without thinking, let the brush go free. Blue streaks, yellow flashes, an incredible kaleidoscope. The paper breathed with me, and I was no longer afraid that the paint would suffocate in the tube. Caleb and I corresponded rarely, saving words like matches so as not to set the forest on fire ahead of time. But every "how are you?" from him splashed fresh water on the coals of doubts. At some point, I realized, waiting is choosing indecision, and choosing is finally living. Therefore, at the end of June, when the heat melted the asphalt to a mirror gloss, I wrote, "If you are really nearby, let's meet where there's still a place for movies that are not in the rental. Today, 7 p.m. The answer came in one word, "I'll be there." The Avalon Cinema has long since stopped showing films. On the facade, the peeled letters V and N hung like broken wings, the posters faded to pale pink shadows. But inside it still smelled of melted butter and old velvet. I walked through the broken glass doors. Popcorn cups from 20 years ago lay on the floor, rows of broken chairs stretched from the orchestra pit to the very stage. Many seats were removed, like knocked-out teeth, and the evening sun crawled along the holey upholstery, like a golden report from the past. Caleb was waiting at the edge of the stage, leaning against a decorative brick. In his hands he held a battery flashlight, but did not turn it on. Enough light fell to see faces, and little to hide any extra words. "It's a pity that the film is no longer playing here," he said when I approached. There was no victory or regret in his voice, just a fact, like an announcement on the platform. "Maybe the film is over," I replied, "but the wall still holds the echo." We climbed onto the stage under our feet, the wood creaked, as if greeting new actors. Caleb spread out an old woolen blanket, and we sat down, dangling our legs where the first rows of fans once stood. "I don't know what the second act will be like," I began, and the words lay on the dust like light coins. "I only know that I don't want to play by someone else's script." He nodded, touching my hand with his fingers in a large circular motion, as if checking if the palm was intact. "I didn't come to demand lines," he replied. "I came to listen to how you write yours." I told him everything, how David and I no longer mask the silence with bustle, how we are looking for where the boundary of obligation and living feeling passes, that perhaps we will reach its edge and turn in different directions, or perhaps we will find a bridge, but without illusions. For now, we are keeping an honest pause. Caleb listened without interrupting, but every time I slowed down, his gaze warmly pushed me, "Continue, I'm here." "So the answers are still being written," he said when I ran out of breath. "They are being written," I confirmed. "But avoiding the choice will no longer work. I want to love truly, and if I don't love, I want to be honest about it too." He paused for a moment. Somewhere above, a swallow slid loudly under the vaults, and the air rippled. "What about writing with me?" Caleb asked finally. Without promises. Just don't tear the page if the ink stumbles. My heart literally jumped, not from romantic affect, but from surprise at how much freedom and respect there was in one phrase. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood up and approached the huge white canvas, the screen on which there had been no frame for a long time. The tips of my fingers touched the cold plastic. You know what I see? I said quietly. A clean field. Everyone can project whatever they want, drama, comedy, even empty snow. But the picture will come to life only if you turn on the projector. I turned around. Caleb was standing in a strip of light that cut through a hole in the roof, and for a moment he seemed to be part of the frame that I hadn't shot yet. I don't know what movie will come out, I continued. But I want to turn on the projector. And not be afraid of sharp patches of light. He came closer. Between us there were 2 breaths left. Then let's start with the title. Continuation is possible, he whispered. I laughed, quietly, but the laughter came off easier than in all these weeks. I didn't ask what titles David would write in his version. I wasn't afraid, because for the first time I felt my director's chair under my back. We sat side by side at the edge of the stage. Caleb took out an old film strip from his pocket, a couple of sections from the museum archives. In the light, the film glowed amber, and the tiny frames of figures seemed incorporeal. He held up the strip to the window in the roof. On a piece of celluloid, a dancer soared in a jump, and after her, a hand reaching for the back of the head in a forgotten movie kiss. Each frame is a tiny yes, he said. Once someone set up the camera, pressed the button, not knowing if this moment would be preserved. I like to believe that every yes is worth it. I turned around to see his face in the half-light. And at the next moment, we touched our foreheads, like 2 actors checking the text in a whisper. The kiss was soft, not a promise, but the beginning of a countdown. In my mouth, there was a slight taste of old caramel popcorn, as if the building still stored layers of the past. We moved apart slowly. There was not enough air, but there was no hurry to swallow. Let's go out, I suggested, feeling the world outside pitifully asking to be in our silent movie. We walked down the central aisle, our steps echoed in the empty space. At the exit, I lingered, looking back once more. The stage in the soft glow seemed like an abandoned set, but it seemed to me that the curtain twitched, the theater nodded to us in farewell. Outside, the city glowed with early evening gold. The cars shimmered in the hot haze, and a faint electric hum stretched over the rooftops, as if the metropolis was warming up its voice before a big conversation. Caleb walked me to my car. We stopped at the curb where an old maple was shedding sticky sap. The tires squeaked slightly under the automatic movement of the parking camera in the rearview mirror, the shade of the sky, resembling cooled tea. I don't know what this will look like in a week, I said, putting my palm on his chest. Or in a month. And you don't need to know, he replied softly. It's enough to feel now. I nodded. He gently took my hand and kissed the inside of my wrist, the place where the skin is thinner than paper. The kiss remained a spot of warmth, and I realized that even if it disappeared tomorrow, the memory of it had already changed the chemical composition of the blood. I'll call, I whispered. I'll answer, he smiled. With the same frame or a new one. I got behind the wheel and started the engine. Caleb stepped back a couple of steps and raised his hand. I waved, a small movement that meant too much. When the car turned onto the avenue, the sun set a little lower, and the city turned amber pink. In the flow, I saw the reflection. A woman behind the wheel smiled with a thin, but confident line, not at those who are waiting to be saved, but at those who are rewriting the map of stars on the inner sky. The traffic light blinked green, and a smooth strip of highway asphalt opened ahead. I lightly pressed the gas. In the side window, the last outlines of Avalon disappeared, but in my head, the white screen continued to glow for a long time, clean, ready to accept any plot. And in my chest, where there used to be a piercing plea for permission, a calm, even yes now beat, the pulse of a movie that is just beginning.